Long ago, in 2005, a Japanese doujin shmup was released that wasn't a Toho game. The setting is a sort of alternate universe 18th century Prussia, where science and alchemy are one and the same. Where an impressive mechanized army burns down their homes and kills their families, two young rebels embark on a suicide mission to take down the General Massady Reich. By throwing dolls at it. That's where we're at. It's Hitogata Happa, which roughly translates into the pleasure of a well-executed self-immolation. Hitogata Happa is, to quote a Shmups forum poster, a weird game. It seems like the publisher, Plain Teen Dispositive, decided to bake a bunch of scraps from the cutting room floor together into some sort of shmup casserole. The first of these scraps is that the game doesn't really have a limited number of lives. Rather, after each stage you can use the gems that enemies drop to purchase more, dolls. That's right, scoring actually does something in this game. You can carry 12 of each dolls, and after unlocking the special characters, you'll have 12 different types. That's kind of a lot of dolls. Whenever you die, the next ship pops right out, and you can change the next ship type in queue on the fly. The result is like Armed Police Batrider taken to its absolute extreme, where you're constantly using up dolls and switching to better ones. The ships are all highly specialized, and over time, playing every single one of them has held some appeal. Although their abilities are a little obtuse and not very well defined, even in the publisher's own instruction manual. These dolls are mirrors of the prospective Rose Cross. You could say that they take you into the future. Yeah, thanks, big help. But once you know the intricacies, it becomes clear that each doll represents an overflowing willingness to experiment and attention to mechanical detail. Taking the full assortment of dolls into account, the only consistent rule among them is that every rule has an exception. Dimbula can seamlessly loop from one side of the screen to the other, a deceptively powerful ability in a game where most bullet patterns have an aimed component. Sikkim can only fire one bullet at a time at a very specific range, but by striking at full range with a constant rhythm, the player can use her to mash out some of the highest damage in the game and damage bosses that hide behind heavy shields. And Fool who... What? What? Huh. Well, the result is that, in a genre that is often about twitch action, resource conservation, and memorization, Hitogata Happa requires a fair amount of strategy to go with the execution. It's not just enough to dodge the pattern or shoot accurately, you also have to bring the right tool to the job, or at the very least use the wrong tool in the right way. Of course, this can require some noble sacrifices. In Hitogata Happa, each and every one of your dolls is born to die. As opposed to the mana meter that governs ability use, the flow meter isn't given some bullshit implied fantasy context. As you fly around avoiding bullets and blowing stuff up, your flow meter is always slowly filling. When your flow meter is finally maxed out, ho-ho! Pilot that baby directly into one of your enemies to kill yourself in a glorious explosion, dealing massive damage in a wide area. If the enemy dies, all bullets on screen are turned into gems and cleared. In terms of scoring, you always want to die by bombing. At the very least, it's going to refund the cost of the ship and greatly increase the point value of your gems. But in terms of survival, you never want to waste ships unless it's absolutely necessary, and unless this is your first run, you have a pretty good idea of which dolls you're going to need to beat the level boss. And of course, if you hit a bullet at the wrong time and fail the bomb, you get nothing but an inglorious death and a comical slapping sound effect. The system is daunting and unwelcoming to a beginning player, but quickly it becomes an exciting gambit that stays appealing on repeated plays. The third basic mechanic of this game is one that makes many of the hardest bullet patterns manageable. Enemies have a bubble called a zone of control that you can activate by flying near them. Bullets move a lot slower through an active zone of control, and if the enemy is killed, those bullets are cancelled. Some zone of control stay active, while some deactivate when you leave. Since it slows the affected enemy's own attacks and can cancel out waves of bullets, zone of controls are vital to moving through some of the scarier patterns in the game. Even when it comes to collecting gems and getting a better score, exploiting these zones of controls makes a huge difference, and will ultimately mean that you can survive longer and afford more and better dolls in the next stage. Alright, so maybe you don't play shmups very often, and you don't realize that these mechanics are fucking insane. Any one of them could have been taken on their own and made some minimalist Ikaruga or Every Extend style puzzle action game. But Hitogata Happa combined all of them into something, well, bigger than the sum of its parts. The mechanics work together to give the player a myriad of options, and the unique bullet patterns and enemies keep the player experimenting with those options. Look, Ikaruga showed us that less is more, and we won't shut up about it. But too often, especially nowadays, developers go for that streamlined approach, and just come off as stingy. It's actually pretty refreshing to play a game that's this creatively balls to the wall, and it takes just as much talent and genius to make it all work together without feeling bloated. The levels have a great rhythm to them and a certain haunting aesthetic. From the endless ocean of tanks in level 2 to the wall of turrets in stage 4, there's always new enemies and concepts being introduced that make every gauntlet feel like something special. As I mentioned, bullet patterns are heavily aimed to force you to keep moving, even when entrenched in the big flowery grid of bullets. And though the game very often recycles enemy types to reprise their attack patterns and signature formations, it never feels as if the game is out of ideas. Every level past the first has a unique mini-boss, and was designed with a distinct theme in mind. Thanks to this, as well as a memorable soundtrack, the game has lent a narrative pacing that is uncommon in shmups. Even schlubs like me who don't bother reading the story will still catch the major emotional notes of the plot. I mean, who wouldn't feel that furtive terror at the floating, blind Stage 4 boss, scanning the horizon with searchlights, or the peculiar rush of nostalgia and fury at the start of Stage 5, as the enemy patterns from the very beginning of the game are reprised at double the speed and ferocity. It's a little weird how fanservice-y this game gets towards other games in the developer's catalog, which is something that not even a turbo nerd like me can fully appreciate. I get Earl is based on the Earl-type ships from the Gundamonium games, which are chronologically after this one, I guess, meaning that the protagonists are actually reaching forward in time to get some of these dolls. Huh. Meanwhile, Pekko is a reference to a game called Dicey Knight from back on the fucking Wonder Swan. Yeah, the Wonder Swan, remember that? But, yeah, come on, it can't be all good. I mean, yeah, it can. 5 stars. But you're going to sound like a weeaboo if you don't say some bad things about this anime Qdama. Alright, fine. The game's kinda hard to get into. On top of the fact that shmups are a pretty niche genre, Hitogata Happa doesn't really do a very good job of easing the player in. The first level plunges you in with a stack of the weakest dolls and no explanation. Any player would be fooled into thinking this was a normal shmup where the gimmick is Leaf's slowdown power. That is until the boss shows up and won't fucking die before the timer runs out. Hitogata Happa expects the player to infer that he's supposed to ram into enemies, but only when the flow meter is full, without so much as a how-to-play video to guide you through. Yeah, there's an instruction manual, but we've already established that it's equal part fact and fiction, and who reads these days? Even after you've gotten used to the game, the first stage remains a cruel trial by fire. By contrast, in the rest of the game, you'll die over and over again, blowing through stacks of dolls because of stupid mistakes, probably never even bothering to bomb, and not really coming out any worse for the wear. Now, the difficulty is there, but you're given so many lives that Hitogata Happa is actually rather easy compared to most shmups. The game also is prone to getting pretty unbalanced in some of the special modes, or even when just using continues during normal play. That's not really a big deal because you shouldn't be using continues in a shmup anyway. That's why you can't record your replay when you can use continues, guys. I got that shit in fraps though, fuck the police. As you might have guessed, I don't give a fuck if the game takes a while to get into, or if the hard mode is a little too hard or whatever. Maybe some of you would have some problems with the anime art, but if that's the case, you've already missed out on a ton of great shmups because of your weird thing about playing as a girl. Hitogata Happa is an amazing game that should be inspiring, to tired shmup veterans who think they've seen it all, or to newbies who have never really been impressed by anything other than Ikaruga. It's heavily experimental, almost to a fault, but in a genre that's often considered dead, I'm not going to complain that the game exposed so much fertile ground. And hey, the game's like $3. Hitogata Happa gets a 5 out of 5 for laying it all on the line, even when it meant sacrificing itself. Get it? Get it? Like in the game. Like the thing you do in the game. Get it? Because the mechanic in the game is like the joke I said. Get it?